If there is one thing that we can all unite behind, regardless of whether you like this film or not, that is film critics not reviewing a film based on the actual quality of the film, but rather the politics that the film pushes. The latest victim of one of these films to get bashed because it doesn't push the right political messages is the latest Rambo film, Rambo: The Last Blood. Now, I haven't been to see Rambo 5 yet, or Rambo Last Blood yet, but from what I hear, it's a pretty good film. The fans seem pretty happy with it. Rambo fans do seem to treat it as an addition to the franchise. They generally think it's a good film. It is basically an action film that gives the fans of Rambo what they want, and that is Sylvester Stallone just shooting people, blowing things up, and taking out bad guys. That is generally what we want when we watch these kinds of action films. But as we all know, mainstream film critics are not like that these days. They will not judge a film on whether it's actually good or not. They'll only agree with it, they'll only give the film a positive rating, only if they've been paid off, or if the film ideologically and politically aligns with them, which Rambo: The Last Blood does not. Now, I did come across a very interesting article right here that, thoroughly talked about this and looked into various film reviews from some of these mainstream critics. Rambo: Last Blood called a racist and misogynistic MAGA fantasy. The reviews for Rambo: Last Blood are in, though we're not really sure that some of them are even reviews. Most of them are just pieces typed up by the author about their own personal agenda unrelated to the film, and fail to actually review the film itself. Isn't that what movie reviews should be, about the movie? Some also don't seem to understand the character of Rambo, or know that the movies are extremely violent. The film currently sits at 34% on Rotten Tomatoes, with the critics' consensus reading, "Like the sequels that preceded it, Rambo: Last Blood is content to indulge in bloody violence at the expense of its main character's once poignant story." Now, this article is a few days old, and after actually looking at the ratings on Rotten Tomatoes, this rating has gone down. If we get it up here, the critics' rating for Rambo: Last Blood is currently sitting at 26%, while the audience score is at 83%. So, the critics pretty much hate it, they detest this film, but however, the audience score is at 83, it's predominantly positive, and they seem to generally like the film, the fans are pretty happy with it. Film critics these days, the mainstream ones that are predominantly left-wing, they're big SJWs and all of that kind of stuff, they're not interested in the actual quality of the film, they're more interested in whether the film ideologically aligns with them or not. And because this film doesn't, they've gave it a very negative rating. Here are a few examples of what some critics have said regarding Rambo: The Last Blood. Grace Randolph of Beyond the Trailer says it's racist and misogynistic. If only Stallone would go back to working with talented and exciting new directors like Ryan Coogler on Creed. Randolph also kicks off her review saying that the movie is overly violent. Well, no shit. It's almost as if it's a Rambo movie. It's pretty much on point. They're also complaining about the film being violent. The Rambo films are generally violent films. Criticising an action film for being too violent is like criticising a horror film for being too scary. The point in a horror film is to scare people. It makes you wonder how some of these people even become film critics, with the rubbish they come out with. IndieWire apparently said, in 2019's hypersensitive cultural environment, the depiction of murderous Mexican crime bosses and their cowering sex slaves encountering a literal white savior doesn't go down so easily. Rolling Stone apparently said, a Reagan-era hero re-engineered for the MAGA age. Sylvester Stallone's perpetual warrior returns in a revenge story that couldn't be more toxic and Trumpian. Here they go again, they're complaining that the film is apparently Trump propaganda, when in reality it's just a mindless action film where Stallone just shoots people. That is simply it. But here they are trying to spin it saying that it's pro-Trump and too right-wing. And The Guardian, we know they're going to give this film a very positive review. They say, this massively enlarged prostate of a film can only make you wince with its badly acted Geronto ultraviolence, its Trumpian fantasies of Mexican rapists and hilariously insecure US border, and its crass enthusiasm for rape revenge attacks undertaken by a still got it senior dude, 73 years young, on behalf of a sweet teenager. The film, co-written by Sylvester Stallone, imagines this demure young woman having her face slashed by an assailant, but the field is left clear for a stag payback showdown. There is no question of her taking her own retributive action. IGN apparently said the filmmakers have made Mexico seem like an infinite wasteland of crime and death, and most of the Latin characters on screen are criminals or broad stereotypes. I understand that Rambo films have really been bastions of cultural togetherness, but in 2019, or the current year, these broad stereotypes are offensive and dated and downright irresponsible. These are just a handful of the reviews, the negative reviews of Rambo: The Last Blood, not on the basis of whether it's a good film or not, but rather the fact that it just doesn't push these SJW critics' political views, and that is solely why they don't like this film. But as we all know, when it comes to these kinds of films, whenever an SJW tells you to do something, you should always generally do the opposite to them. And that's exactly what I'm gonna do when I go see this film maybe one day next week. As we all know, I've said this previously in other videos regarding SJW nonsense, if the SJWs and the mainstream film critics or anything like that are against it, it generally means it could be something good, or it's possibly something worth seeing. And Rambo: Last Blood here is probably yet another one of those films that's probably worth seeing. But anyway people, be sure to let us know what you think about this down below. What are your opinions on Rambo: Last Blood? Are you gonna go see it like I am? Be sure to let us know what you think about this film down below, alright? Alright gentlemen, this has been Lord Flashheart. Be sure to rate, comment, favourite, share and subscribe, and I will see you again. Cheerio!